My name is Arun. I lead technical product management at Bajaj Finserv Health, which is a 2.5 year old healthcare tech startup under the Bajaj Finserv group of companies. I have over 9 years of experience as a product manager. Have worked with Microsoft, Ola, McKinsey, and UiPath robotic process automation systems. So it's a combination of B2B and B2C, both websites and mobile apps. So a lot of experience out there. Today, we'll be talking about how to take a product or a feature from MVP to full rollout across your entire customer base, right? And as we get started with this, are there any quick thoughts or any quick questions on what you would like me to discuss or what you would like me to answer? We'll do a very quick run through of this feature that I built at Ola. If you would like a more in-depth explanation with further queries or further discussions, please let me know. We can schedule a follow-up session later. But if there are any early thoughts on what you are looking forward to learn or experience from this session, please drop a note on the chat window. Again, apologies for the late start. As I said, I was able to join from my phone, but it took me a while to move to the laptop. If you can cover how documentation is done from the PM side, that would be helpful. Great. That is not something I particularly cover in this presentation. Let me talk about it for a couple of minutes, though, Shantanu, and we can connect offline, or we can do another deep dive session on how spec documents are written, right? So I have a template for it, and I actually do a couple of quick exercises on what a feature spec doc would look like. So we could do a session with that, but I will try to touch upon this. Any other thoughts? No? Okay, so let's get started. Right. So we'll talk about MVP to full rollout of a feature at Ola, which is called queued allotments, or let's say it's called queued allotments, right? That's a more public understood term. So at the end of the session, I hope we'll learn how to launch an MVP, iterate and improve on that MVP. MVP means minimum viable product. So this has been a term that came into existence during the early parts of product management, that is early around 2011, 2012 kind of. And over time, the word has morphed a lot to lose its original meaning, and is now, there are other terms like RAT, which is called riskiest assumption test, which effectively mean the same thing, but we'll go with the industry standard term, which is MVP, meaning minimum viable product. And we'll figure out how to scale that. How to launch an MVP, iterate and improve upon the MVP, grow adoption to increase uptake among your customers, and hopefully by that you become better PMs, that is product managers, right? Now, so we'll quickly look at some objectives in business context and look through the rollout phases in learning, FAQs and summary of this feature as it was rolled out at Ola, and I'll leave some time at the end for questions and answers. Right? I'm keeping it a little fast, keeping the time in my mind. But if you have any questions, do drop a note on the chat window. I will take it up at the end, or I'll answer it during the session. Right? Now, let's take an example of what it means to scale anything, right? And here I've taken an example of a non-tech deliverable. How do you scale it, and how does the solution change when you need to scale it, right? Let's take the example of providing water, drinking water, to n number of people, and as n increases, let's see how the solution scales, right? So when n is 1, that means there's just one person, and you need to give one person a drink of water. So there's just one person. What would be the tool that would be sufficient for this? It would just be a glass. You bring a glass of water, and that's enough for one drink of water for one person, right? Now let's scale that up. Suppose you have a few people, you have 5 or 6 people, and you need to bring a drink of water for each of them, right? Assuming you use the same solution that you had initially, right? It is a single glass of water, and say that's all the resources that you have. You have one glass of water, and there are 4 or 5 people waiting for a drink. If you had to every time bring a glass of water, wait for one person to finish it, then go back, refill it, and bring it to the other one, that would just not be sustainable, right? The other people will be waiting for too long. So that is when you need to develop a new solution, such as a bottle of water, which can cater, which solves the same problem. After all, you're giving a drink of water to a few people. It solves the same problem for a slightly larger number. Now let's increase the number a few more. Say you have a conference room full of people. You have about 10 or 12 people, right? Then again, this solution, which is a single bottle of water being filled and given to a few people, would not scale again for for multiple small groups like this, so which effectively become a large group, right? The solution here, again, which is deployed in most offices today, is to use the water dispenser and a can of water, which is about 20-25 liters, that can easily serve the water requirements for a room full of people for even a day. And as you scale that further and further up to, say, something like multiple buildings or an entire township of water, then even single water dispensers like this aren't sufficient. You would need to have an overhead tank, which effectively and at scale can provide water to this entire township of people, right? So the point of this exercise is to understand that as a solution works, to scale it up to reach a wider set of customers will require tweaking the solution itself. A lot of companies or a lot of organizations are often in the mindset that, hey, I have something that works. Let's just put more people and more resources and push the same solution for it to grow and scale. No, your systems will not, physics won't allow it to happen that way. You would have to re-engineer your solution to be able to address a wider and larger audience, right? So keeping this in mind, let's ask this question to ourselves, right? As an organization, what do you do to learn most effectively? Do you focus on quantity, that is, ship a lot of features frequently? Or do you focus on quality, that is, you use techniques like first time right FTR and test driven development, that's TDD, and focus on quality to get things right as you ship them? Or do you focus on industry best practices, right? The industry, you're not alone in the industry, there are competitors either way in any side, and the industry has matured over time. So they have developed some best practices. Do you trust those best practices and apply them to your company, your problem statement? Any thoughts? 1, 2, or 3? Which one would be is most effective for an organization to learn? Shatul says 2 and 3. That is, focus on quality and focus on best practices. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Others also say 2 and 3. Okay. Moving on. Very counterintuitively, the actual answer is 1, and this is brought about by this workshop of ceramics and photography that happened at the University of Florida several years ago. So there were 2 groups of students. One group was asked to focus on quantity, right? Just build a lot of ceramic pots. And the second group was asked to focus on quality. So the first group probably would have been graded according to the weight of the ceramic that they had produced by the end of the term. So if they produce, say, 50 kilos of pots, then they get a A+ grade. If they produce 40 kilos, then a B grade, and so on, so on. And similarly for the quality parameters for the second group, if they produced an excellent ceramic pot, they did an A+. Something not that great would get a B, and so on, right? Now, what do you think happened at the end of the term? What happened was, this group, which was focused on quantity, obviously produced more quantity, right? They were focused on quantity. These were focused on less quantity. However, it was seen that this group that focused on quantity also produced the greatest quality of pots. Why? It's like practice. Say you play a sport, or you play an instrument, or you do any kind of skilled work, skilled hobby or exercise. The repetition of that movement over and over again makes you better at the quality of that movement. Obviously, you produce a lot more iterations, but you also get better at quality. Say you're practicing to swim, or you're practicing to, say, play an instrument. Imagine reading tons of theoretical books about swimming, and never stepping into the pool? Will you become an expert at swimming by reading 20 books about swimming and never stepping into the pool and be an expert on day one? Of course not. You have to get into the pool and swim every day for years. There will be some good days, there will be some bad days, but you will get better at it just via practice. So the very act of exercising the muscle makes you better at execution. Very counterintuitive thought, but focusing on quantity of repetitions and learning from each repetition. It's not mindless repetition, right? What went wrong in the last repetition that I can improve in my next repetition? Focusing on that edge of the learning curve kind of experience is what brings about better quality and quantity. So just to summarize, the second group that was asked to focus on quality ended up not building any pots, and they had just a lump of dead clay at the end of the at the end of the session, right? So with some of these items in mind, so what I was saying is focus on skill, not theory, and practice, not just philosophy. Just taking a couple of questions that's come up. One task continuously done increases productivity and quality and efficiency. Yes, so thanks for the thought, Mohit. Right. So let's take a look at the Ola queued allotment case study, right? So in the last several years, all of you must have seen this message anytime you've taken an Ola ride. It says your driver is completing a ride and will reach you shortly. This did not exist before 2017. Before 2017, when you requested a ride, you would always get an empty cab, right? And if you remember, if any of you have used Ola or Uber prior to 2017, you would remember having to call the cab or the cab calling you and asking, sir, how do I get to your location? Kahan aau, kaise aau? To use some vernacular. So then you would direct them saying, please come here, take a left, take a right, come to this apartment complex and so on. You would get into the car and then tell the driver where you wanted to go, your destination. You didn't enter your destination into the Ola app, right? So this is all looks like way back 2016, 2017 compared to 2021. I think I need to update the slide. It feels like the Stone Age. All of these features didn't exist. Pretty much Geo and 4G didn't exist, which have changed our lives and have brought about a lot of digital disruption in India in the last several years. Without GPS and without data on the streets, imagine Google Maps not working. How would Swiggy and Zomato work? How would Ola and Uber navigate? How would your Google Pay or Paytm or Beam UPI work? So all of these things have changed a lot in the last 5 years. I'm talking about a feature that was built and scaled before all of these disruptive technologies that have affected our lives, before all of these actually came, right? So it used to feel like you're living in the Stone Age at that time. Now, answering the question that Sutanu asked, Shantanu asked, sorry, I missed the name. How do you go about PM documentation? Always start with the why. You're building a feature for some kind of impact, some kind of business rationale or justification, right? So start your documentation with that being very clear that this is my business rationale or justification. And that is why I'm designing the feature in this way. So that will drive conversations with your designers and your engineers and any other stakeholders saying, hey, now that we agree that this is the problem that needs to be solved, we can debate about, is this the best design to solve it? Is this the cheapest? Is this the easiest to implement and so on? They will not question at the end of the day, maybe you've spent a lot of time and money building some feature and they're like, okay, now what? How do I know whether this thing is successful or not? That question will not come up. So if you start from the business justification, right? So why was this feature to be built? If you take Ola's driver capacity on the platform at the time this feature was being rolled out, that is around 2016, 2017, say they had, I don't know, say, or even now they have over 1 lakh drivers on the platform, and say each of them spends 10 hours a day on an average. That means Ola has 10 lakh hours of driver time or capacity available on its platform as inventory. And this inventory is what it is trying to sell to the customers by serving rides for the customers, right? So how was this capacity of driver hours on the platform distributed among these 4 categories at that time, right? So 46% of the time, drivers were idle. That means they did not have a ride. They were just standing around somewhere waiting for a ride. right? Another 46% of the time is what is known as utilized. Utilized means that the drivers were serving a ride for their customers, and this is how Ola earns money, Ola earns revenue, right? Another 7% is what is called dry run, and we'll focus on this in a moment. And another 1% is wasted in things like cancellations and so on. We will ignore this for the moment. What does dry run mean? Dry run is the time between a passenger being allotted a ride and them starting the ride. So say your ride is allotted at 11:12 a.m., but the cab is 2 kilometers away and takes 15 minutes to get to your location. So that 15 minutes or 2 kilometers is the dry run, right? That is the time that no one is paying for. Your previous passenger has alighted and left the cab. The cab is far away somewhere. Your next passenger will start paying only once they get to the cab. So the time that the driver takes to travel from the previous passenger's drop location to the next passenger's pickup location is essentially time that is already booked, because you've already promised your platform. As in, Ola has already promised this cab to the waiting passenger, so it cannot be booked intermediate for someone else. But no one is paying for this time, so that is known as dry run, and that accounted for about 7% of the total capacity available on Ola at the time, right? So we decided to attack the dry run. Obviously, the idle time is the largest chunk, and this is what you want to convert and bring it into utilized. But this is a very hard problem to tackle across industries, whether it is restaurant industry or the airline industry or any other industry. Capacity utilization of idle time and bringing it into utilized capacity is a hard problem to solve. This had an immediate solution that we could see, and that is what I will be describing to you. Any questions? Ashutosh asks, don't it take dry run also into price calculation, because the total fare is never the calculated value? Let me come back to you on that, Ashutosh. As I said, for paucity of time, we would want to cover the rollout of this feature and then take any questions. So let's look at how we decided to do queued allotments to attack this dry run problem, right? And why should I even bother? What if the dry run stays at 7% or 10%? Why do I care about it? Every 1% improvement in utilization resulted in approximately 2% reduction in cash burn. And at that time, Ola was burning cash at about 7,000 crores per annum, right? That's about $1 billion per annum, slightly less maybe. So yes, so it was still a huge cash burn, and any improvement or any reduction in cash burn directly contributes to the bottom line, right? So this was a very important metric or important impact of any features that we would develop. So the objective of the feature, from the background that we have received now, was to reduce dry run. It was about 7% of capacity and an average of 2.1 kilometers. And the objective was to reduce it, right? Now, generally at this point, I take some time to discuss possible solutions, but let's move on to exactly what Ola did to address this problem, which is what you currently see on the app, and what are the different phases of rollout and learning, which let the feature go from MVP to full rollout, right? So the algorithm was very simple. There is a passenger who's requesting a ride at some point. There is a cab at some distance away from that point. So, and this cab is currently going to drop their existing passenger who's sitting in the cab right now at this point. This is the situation that we have right now, right? So this is the path that the cab is going to follow to come and drop this passenger. And then if we allot this cab to this rider, we can say that the cab is first going to drop this passenger and then is going to come pick up the next passenger, right? Now, how do we make this happen? We draw a circle from the requesting passenger as the center, and you have a certain search radius. So say you have 2 or 2.1 kilometers, which is the typical dry run, as the search radius. And you find all cabs that are having passengers currently, I think that are currently busy inside that search radius, who are dropping the passenger within a certain drop radius, again, centered around the same point, right? So it's very simple. The cab is at a not unreasonable distance. It shouldn't be 10 kilometers away. It should be 2.5 kilometers away. it should not drop someone it should not go out of the circle, for example, or it should not even go very near to the edge of the circle, because going back from there to the center again will take too long. So the algorithm is very simple. Find a cab within the search radius. If it is dropping the passenger within the drop radius, that is a small distance from the waiting passenger, allot this ride to this cab, right? So very simple algorithm. Search for a cab in the search radius, which is dropping off a customer inside the drop radius. And then you can expect the dry run to be only the red line, right? So the existing passenger is paying for this part of the ride. Nobody's paying for this part of the ride. That's the dry run. And once you come here, the passenger will sit in the cab and somebody starts paying again for that point onwards, right? So the dry run is reduced. It's approximately equal to drop radius. The approximation is due to any curves and turns that are, the roads are not a straight line, right? The total time taken would be the time to drop the existing passenger from the current point to their destination, that's T1, plus the time to drive from the existing passenger's drop point to the next passenger's pickup point, that is to T2, plus a little buffer at this point for exchanging cash. Remember, this is pre-Paytm, pre-Google Pay, UPI, and so on. It was highly cash. So exchanging cash, generating the bill, and so on would take a couple of minutes. So add a few minutes of buffer at this point. So that would be the estimated time that the app would commit to the waiting passenger, right? So with this algorithm, so again, Shantanu, to address your question, these are all part of the design that are covered inside the spec documentation that a PM would write. And this is how you launch the MVP. So you define, this is the problem, and this is what I will measure to know whether my problem has been correctly addressed or not. So what are the metrics for success? If this feature was successful, the average dry run across the platform should decrease, right? So that is the success metric. And a control metric is, because we are kind of making the experience slightly poorer for the waiting customer, they would have a tendency to cancel. So the control metric is that cancellations should not increase significantly. We need to be able to keep the waiting passengers' experience pretty good, right? So how do you start off with the MVP? Start off with no communication at all, right? Just put the algorithm, turn the algorithm on in the backend on one fine day. And at Ola, I turned it on these two locations in Bangalore. Majestic bus station is a large central bus station where a lot of intercity buses and things come. And Phoenix Market City Mall is a large mall in Whitefield in Bangalore, right? So any passengers who are either, these are typically places with a high number of footfalls, high number of requests. So we just pick these two locations such that any passengers who are requesting rides from either the Majestic bus station or the Phoenix Market City Mall are likely to encounter this feature and will be allotted a cab that is currently serving someone else. Remember that before we turned on this feature, all the passengers and the drivers are used to only getting empty cabs, right? So this is going to be turned on one fine day for passengers who are requesting rides from these two locations. So we turned it on one fine day, and what do you think happened? As you can expect, there were a whole bunch of cancellations, right? So things never go right in phase one. That's fine. So when we called up a lot of the customers and asked them, hey, what exactly is going wrong? Why are you canceling? These were some of the reasons that we found. The first is that the customer said the cab is not moving in my direction. So apparently they book a ride. The Ola app tells them your ride has been allotted. This is your cab. They look at the cab and the cab is not moving in their direction because it's moving towards the intermediate drop location. So they say, okay, my cab is not moving in my required direction, and cancel. Next reason is when the customer calls the cab and says, okay, bhaiya, where are you? Are you coming to pick me up? Remember, neither the cabbie nor the customer is used to this experience, right? It's day one when we just turned this feature on. So the cabbie says, no, I have a customer in my cab. I'll come to you after this. Or they just simply refuse to pick up the phone at all. The customers are not used to this experience and they cancel, right? The third is when the cabbie says, sir, I already have a passenger. I think something went wrong. Ola must have messed up. You're supposed to get an empty cab, so something's gone wrong. Please cancel. So the driver asks the customer to cancel, right? So all of these issues happened in phase one, which led to a significant spike in cancellations from the average that was there across the city. So comparison of the average across the city to these two locations in Bangalore that we just spoke about. There were a couple of cases where the driver abandoned the current customer, right? So the waiting customer calls the driver and says, hey, I'm waiting for you. The driver, for some reason, assumes that the current ride has ended and hence the next customer is waiting. And they ask the customer who's sitting in the cab at that moment, you please get down here in the middle of the road, right? So we had a couple of very angry calls. Imagine you're trying to catch a flight or something and the cabbie says, sir, you need to get down in the middle of the road. So obviously that was a PR nightmare. Anyway, so but fortunately they weren't too many. There were only one or two. So they abandoned the current customer in a couple of places and started going to the next customer. So these are all the kinds of issues that we faced at MVP. Now, we had to tackle both the customer's experience and the driver's experience. I do realize that we are moving ahead of time. I'll try to wrap this up in the next 7 to 10 minutes as soon as possible. Right. So what did we do to improve the customer's experience so that customer doesn't end up canceling? The first thing we did was add a toast message for the customer. A toast message is something that comes up like this and waits for say 3 seconds or 5 seconds and then just disappears, right? The issue with this is that the customer misses the message. The customers apparently aren't staring at their phone all the time. They hit request ride and then they go off and do something else. Maybe they go off to have breakfast or take a shower or do something else. They are assuming that the ride will get allotted and then the cabbie will call up or something will happen. They're not staring at their phone. They're not staring at the Ola app at least, right? So if a notification comes up like this and just disappears, the customer just misses the message and the situation is exactly the same as phase one, which is equivalent to not communicating anything at all to the customer. The customer, after all, missed your communication. So it's equivalent to not communicating anything. So this did not work. Next, what did we try after that? We tried adding a route marker, a route along with a marker, which is the intermediate drop location, along with the toast message. So the toast message will still be there and all of these other features would also be added. This led to a bunch of implementation challenges, engineering challenges while drawing this route marker. So that had to be paused for a while. What we did as phase two was just add this orange guy that you see, indicating intermediate drop location. So when the customer lands on this page, first they'll see this toast message come up, wait for 3 seconds and then disappear, which apparently they seem to miss, so that's okay. But they will see this orange marker on the screen, which did not exist till now, right? So that indicates that there is something interesting going on here. If the customer tapped this message, if the customer tapped the marker, this toast message would reappear and disappear. So it kind of indicates that, look, this is the place that the ride is going to get completed. It's not very explicit, but in a subtle way, it is able to tell the customer that, look, this is an important place. If the cab is going towards this location, don't panic. It will come to you later. And it says your driver is completing a ride, will reach you shortly. Not a problem. Right? So tapping the marker would redisplay the toast. We had some issues where customers assumed that the time taken would be longer than what is committed by the Ola app, right? That was due to historical reasons where a different feature apparently found out that any time committed greater than 9 minutes would cause the customer to cancel. So even if the ETA is 15 minutes, the Ola app would end up committing only 9 minutes because anything over 9 minutes would cause the customer to cancel. So customers had self-learned to mistrust the ETA and try to adjust it by saying, okay, it's going to take 2x of the time that is going to be that is indicated on the app. So once we started doing this T1 plus T2 plus buffer kind of calculation and started committing, say, 12 minutes or 15 minutes, customers assumed it's going to take 30 minutes and they used to cancel. This was just a matter of better messaging and better controlling or not, not trying to be over optimistic or over commit to the customers. With time, this problem disappeared. Anyway, moving on. So that was the customer experience. It got solved to a large extent with the route marker as well as the drop marker that was there. The toast message, all of them in combination were able to address the concerns of the customer largely. Let's look at the driver experience. This actually went through a lot more churn in terms of UX. So some of the issues that we faced were that, remember, again, this is pre-data on the phone, right? So a lot of communication used to happen via SMS. So by the time the SMS arrives, the driver just logs off after the current trip completes. So this driver had no communication. Had no communication. They don't even have any clue that another person's waiting for them. So they come, they drop this person off, and then they just log off. Imagine the plight of the waiting customer. Ola app has promised them that this car is going to come to them. They wait and see that your driver is completing a ride and will come to serve you shortly. They wait to see this cab go somewhere else, drop a customer off. That is where the orange marker is, and then the cab just disappears from screen because the driver logged off. Imagine how furious they are, right? How did we try solving it? We tried solving it by adding a toast notification for the driver. It had the same problem as the customer. That is, the driver misses the toast notification, right? Because they are in traffic, there's a lot of dust and noise and everything around. How do you get around that? The driver is not looking at their phone all the time. Unlike now. Now they seem to be staring at their phone all the time, but earlier they didn't. They were actually focused on the traffic. One way to address that issue is to have a persistent push notification, which is just information only, saying, please don't log off, your next ride has been allotted, or something like that, right? This, again, was at a time when Android itself was very clunky. So to add customer contact details, distance, and time to pick up, all of this required further engineering effort as well as support from the Android system. Both of them evolved over time, and all of these items are also added, improving the driver's experience, right? We had other issues where the driver could not cancel the ride because it was an FYI only notification saying your next ride has been allotted. Sorry, you can't do anything about it. You can't cancel it. It's been force accepted for you, right? So we got a lot of complaints from the driver. We tried to add buttons to the push notification to address that. That required system support. We had issues where the driver said, look, this is happening too frequently. I'm not even getting time to take a break to have some tea or to go to the washroom or to even refuel, right? And this is becoming very irritating. We address that by having another feature that says go offline after my current ride. So that again turned out to be quite successful. That's like a feature extension that became successful by itself. That was further extended into go home. So the drivers started using go offline to position themselves strategically so that they could get rides towards their own home at the end of the day. So we made that itself as a feature, saying, let's have a go home feature. Then we further extended the go home feature to make it go to any location in the city. As I said, I'm covering all of these very fast, again, due to paucity of time. If anyone would like to discuss this in further detail, we can have a one-on-one call, or we can set up a follow-on call. And with that, we kind of come to the end of how we took a feature from MVP to full rollout. Remember that you will start out with the feature seeming like a failure. A lot of things will go wrong. I'm skipping the architectural enhancement side. That's okay. So, yeah. Right. So, remember, as we discussed at the beginning of the session, scaling requires new solutions to old problems, as we saw in the case of the drink of water. Scaling and agile go hand in hand, which is essentially small incremental steps being taken to improve the feature. Fix bugs at each step. So at each step, as we discovered these issues with either the customer or the driver, you have to fix them before rolling out to a larger set of customers or to rolling out to larger geographies. Else, remember that the edge cases will overwhelm you. Do not try to go to full rollout right after MVP. Go via phased rollout, else the edge cases will overwhelm you, and what is actually a success will seem like a failure. So with that, we come to the end of our session today on how to take a feature from MVP to full rollout. I hope you enjoyed the session. If you do have any questions or comments, I have a couple of minutes to take them.
Hi, Arun. I have a question on that dry run thing.
Yes. Hi, Ashutosh.
Hi. So in terms of calculation, like I consider like they must, because every time like when I've done the kind of calculation which comes up, say that this is the time run that I've done, this is the calculator that have been taken into consideration while putting up the price, that really doesn't match accurately. Because why would they lose on those 2 or 1.5 kilometers the kind of experience they're giving? I think like if you have worked there, I'm not sure if it is true or not. But if I was at their place, I would have taken into that and also into consideration.
So pricing is an entirely different ball game, which is a huge amount of pricing pressure is from competition, right?
Yeah.
So every 1 rupee or even 50 paise per kilometer difference that the competitor can offer can translate into say around uh, 15 I mean how 5, 10, 15 rupees depending on the length of the ride
Yeah.
for a ride. So pricing, I mean, to be honest, Ola still, I don't know whether it is at least unit economics positive. It's definitely not making profits and things like that. And in 2016, 2017, both Ola and Uber were highly dependent on investment, right?
Yeah.
So taking, adjusting pricing to compensate for the dry run was pretty much out of the question, because uh, increasing the pricing would have meant that we would lose customers to Uber at that time,
Yeah.
right? So that is a different pressure that goes on apart from your unit economics, apart from your operations altogether, right? So pricing is not dictated only by dry run; they're dictated by a lot of things. Most importantly, competition, but also things like what is the product mix that you want to have. Would you want to would you want to offer a discount on say a prime, right, an Ola Prime or a premium kind of category, just because it's been starving for the last 20 minutes? Nobody's been requesting an Ola Prime, right? Everyone's been requesting a micro or a mini. So would you want to offer the prime at a discount? So there are all sorts of things that come into pricing. But thank you for the thought. Um, this is definitely one of them. And as I said, this I'm talking about over 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of things would have changed since then, as the focus on unit economics, as the focus on reducing dependence on investment, and the focus on going to IPO has increased a lot at Ola.
Yeah. True.
Yes.
One
It,
one more one more
yeah,
thing
sure, sure.
one more thing I have is when you mentioned like when you roll out on a new feature, it is something which needs to be tested in a small set of sample.
Absolutely.
Correct. But is there any quantum defined? Because uh, be like a feature considering coming in an Ola app or an Uber
Mhm.
app, that is something which is like I cannot just rely on a very small set of data.
You can see the small set of data won't get you impact, right?
Yeah.
If 50 customers in Ola per day do something or the other, it's not going to change Ola's bottom line at all,
Yeah.
but you will be able to figure out whether the feature works, right? So
Okay.
and how do you, so let me answer the first part, which is how do you determine the quantum? The how part depends on a lot on the industry. So what I mean to say is, here it was very easily done by geography, right?
Yeah.
Because it is, I mean, say it was Swiggy or Zomato, that would also probably work by geography, saying that I'm going to turn this feature turn this feature on certain parts of the city. Now, depending on your product or your company, you might want to take a different axis, which may not be geographies. It may be time, it may be money. So, for example, Cred has, how does Cred do its MVP? It said that, okay, we're going to only target the very, very 1% or even 0.5% of India's population that has a credit card, make it an invite only affair, right? That's how they started, and I think things initially, if I remember right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they said, okay, we're going to do our MVP like that, and then slowly open up to the rest of the world. So that they did not go by geography; they went by income. Someone else could go by time, so they could say, like for example, if you want to launch a feature um, in say Amazon or Flipkart or something, you might want to. That could also be done by geography. You might pick some of the largest cities in India and launch there, or you might say, okay, they're going to have the big $1 billion sale, or they're going to have a Christmas and New Year sale. So during that sale time, maybe you can use a combination. During that sale time in Bangalore or in Delhi, I'm going to launch a certain feature, which is a certain pricing mechanism or an EMI scheme or whatever, right? Some kind of feature. So the axis along which you determine the customer segment will vary by industry and by the feature. but I highly recommend starting with a very, very small subset so that it doesn't blow up in your face. And unfortunately, I've seen too many startups, in fact, too many large companies as well, which build a feature and they're like, okay, we've just managed to build it, because engineering the feature itself can take so much time and effort that they are just relieved to have it engineered, and they say, okay, now release it to entire public. And if I had released the V1 that we had engineered of this feature to the entire public, I would have had so many cancellations that I would have thought this is a failure, let's roll it back. Whereas in fact, actually it's a success, right? There are just some tweaks required to make it look like a success, but it is a success. So too many startups, are fail because they are too eager to roll out directly to full rollout and not go through the discipline of going through MVP to full rollout.
Okay.
Phase wise. Yeah.
Addition to that, like the companies have become big now, they have enough amount of people inside.
Right.
Would that be like create a bias, like if they test it in-house? Because for example, if I am putting up a feature, I'll do a test. I'll put it on my a beta version of it. I'll put it on the test flight and then ask my employees to download the app and look up on the feature and give a feedback.
So that how would you think SAP will do this? Right? SAP can't roll out SAP to its employees. They don't use it. B2B features are often hard. You would have to find a suitable candidate customer to be able to try this out. Or even if it's something like, say, B2C features, definitely. So this is called dog fooding. It's becoming an industry standard term, which is derived from a line that used to exist earlier, saying "eat your own dog food." Right. So if there's a dog food manufacturing company, it needs to eat its own dog food before it sells to customers. So test your own products with your employees before bringing it out to customers. It's a very, very good metric. All of the large companies, whether it's, and I've worked at Microsoft, I know people who work at Google and Flipkart and so on, all of them do a phase called dog fooding, where the feature is released to their own employees before it's released to public. It's a very, very good phase to do. Ensure that you release to customers, you release to employees who are not the guys building the feature.
Obviously.
Which includes people who are not building the feature. So if there are 4 engineers and 2 product managers, at least include a couple of HR people, finance person, operations person, someone. So you at least get the feel of a new customer from within your company. The specific people who've been working on the feature will be so close to the feature that they are acting more like QA engineers. They'll be worried about, is the feature working as I designed it, rather than is it solving the problem that I wanted to solve.
Correct.
Right. So,
So, but like when it comes to any features, say MVP or the first version of my feature, so like most of the people say, like you need when you're starting on something, an MVP is something like which needs to come at like 2-3 months or 4 months. So is it like an average of number of months or number of days which have been so far, or it can be anything?
So I wouldn't put it in time. The MVP is done once you don't have any new feedback. It doesn't mean you've solved all the problems, but you're not at least getting any new feedback, right? So you've talked to, say, you roll out an MVP today, you talk to 20 customers or 50 customers or 100 customers, and at the end of that, you're like, okay, I have heard everything that I can. I don't seem to be getting any new feedback. That's when you say, I'm done with an MVP, I'm ready to go to the next phase. Now, that is a call that you take, saying, look, should I just take the same MVP to the next phase? Or are there serious bugs, serious issues like experience issues that we saw in this Ola feature that need to be fixed before I can take it to the next phase? Right. But I would not define it by time.
Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Anyone else? Any questions? Thanks for those questions, Ashutosh. It was very, very insightful. And thanks for the discussion.
Thanks for the inputs, Arun.
Hi, this is Sudhindra.
Hi.
My question was on basically kind of when you are in the phase 1 of MVP, how do you actually, I'm sorry, I'm not using the right term, but how do you actually find out that it's really working out? I mean, profit is one thing. Let's say talk about Ola feature. Let's say Ola itself launched with a very basic app and feature. Profit is definitely one thing that could help to understand whether the product is viable or not. But what else apart from profit is what I wanted to ask.
Not, I mean, profit, not at all. So I would say this. So, for example, for this feature, the objective was, is it reducing dry run? Right now, obviously, the end goal is to reduce dry run for the platform as a whole. But when I launch the MVP, my definition will be for the drivers who do this kind of queued allotment. That means, they are the ones who are dropping off a feature of a customer and then going to the next customer. Has the dry run reduced for that subset of drivers, right? So, in a short answer to your question, is the feature having the expected impact that it's trying to deliver for the people who experience it in the MVP? And that does not have to be revenue, that does not have to be profit at all.
So what you're saying is it's not only any specific metrics or KPIs, but also you look into various feedback.
No. So it is definitely a metric. So in this example, say on day one, there were 40 customers who experienced this this feature. Hence 40, I mean, there were 40 drivers rather who experienced this feature, right? So for those 40 drivers, did the dry run reduce from 2.1 kilometers? Did it become, say, 1 kilometer or 0.5 kilometers, right? That is what I would track. Does it have the expected impact for the MVP set of customers?
Oh, yeah, got
right. It. Will it decrease my cash burn? Not with 40 customers. I need several lakhs of customers to be able to experience this feature before it's going to show up on my bottom line. But the expected impact of this feature is reduction in dry run. That I should be able to see for the 40 drivers who were impacted by the feature on the day one, right?
Yeah, sure. And sorry, I just had one more question, extension of it. See, MVP itself is to test out if the product would really work at the largest scale. Is MVP also then rolled out on a pilot basis just for a certain set of, let's say, talk about Ola, roll out to certain areas in Bangalore, not for the entire city? Is that really happens or?
Yes. I don't know whether it still does so, but at least in 2016, 2017, that was a very core product management deliverable to roll out either to roll out phase by phase, whether it's by geography or by time or by whatever, but you have to roll out phase by phase. And I highly support that. I think that's like an anti-explosive, right? If you roll out to your entire customer base at one go just to try to get gains early, it'll blow up in your face and you'll get no gains.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Vinika, how are we doing on time?
Yeah, we are good. If there are any other questions, the learners can ask you. We still have some time. Or you can write on chat. Yeah, please.
Arun, I'm Shantanu.
Yeah,
I was the one who wrote on chat about the documentation
right.
before the lecture. The reason why I'm asking this is because I've been giving interviews, for product management roles, and I belong to a enterprise account management profile.
Right.
So we do not do the kind of documentation that is expected from a APM or a product manager. Right. And there was an interview which I recently gave where I couldn't answer it well on how do I make documents and do I do the kind of documentation and what documentations are required for an APM kind of profile. So I just wanted to know a glimpse of that so that I can have something to say from the next time. And it's not a part of my current role actually. To make
not a problem. Let me just show you a quick. This is kind of veering into different areas, but not a problem. I have a hard stop at 12 though. So anyway, let's cover this quickly. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Right. So these are the pointers which you would want to cover in a spec talk, right? Justification.
Okay.
Why are you building this feature at all? What is it supposed to do to the business, right? Who is the target customer persona? And this should be answered from a corporate level, not just at a feature level. There are several startups, several companies, which if you ask them, who's your customer? They'll say, everyone in the world is my customer. If you ask Netflix, if you ask a layperson, who do you think is Netflix's customer? They'll say everyone who watches TV is Netflix customer. No, you can bet that Netflix has a very clear idea of who their customer is. It will be very clearly defined, and it'll be a billion people. It'll be say 300 million people or 500 million people in the world, not a billion people. It'll probably be something like urban, upper middle class, between the ages of 20 and 40, something. I mean, they'll have some definition in their head, which is what they're building Netflix and all the content for, right? The what are the goals and the non-goals? So these often come directly from the justification, but justification is usually that this is the problem that the business is facing. This is how this is. So I'll just show you an example right after this to figure out what the goals and non-goals are. This is usually the how, or the feature design is usually the meat of the spec, which is the design description. How is the feature supposed to work? So that entire figure that I showed you about the algorithm, search radius, drop radius and stuff, all of this gets covered in the feature design description. The metrics, what are the funnel metrics and what are the impact metrics to be measured? Funnel metrics are, if a feature has say 3 or 4 pages, are people going from page 1 to page 2 to page 3 to page 4, right? And how much is the drop off in each page? So 100 people to come to page 1, maybe 75 people go to page 2, and suddenly only 25 people go to page 3. That means there's a big drop off between page 2 and page 3. So all that shows up in your funnel metrics. What is it that you want to measure? So you will measure clicks of this button, or clicks of, you will measure number of people who landed on this page from this page. So some kind of metric like that is what you would define. That's the funnel metric. The impact metric is usually not visible at MVP level, but impact metric is the one that you would measure in the case of Ola. That would be the dry run, right? So is the feature having the impact on your target customer as expected, right? So that is the impact metric. Considerations, again, most people miss this out, and this usually comes back to bite them later. Things like, should it be, so is it regulated? So in healthcare, in finance and things, these are highly regulated, and you might find that there are regulations saying you can't do this or you have to do this or whatever. So are you following those regulations? Are you doing things like language, right? Are things supposed to be available only in English, or are they supposed to be available in multiple languages? Can the users choose their language? So language considerations. Platform, is it supposed to be app or web? Is it supposed to be iOS, Android? Is it supposed to be cross-platform? If I move from my web to my phone, do I expect things to be synced? Say I have a chat application which I can use on my web, on the web and on my phone. And I move from web to phone. Is my chat from web supposed to carry over to my phone like it does in say Google and even Slack or Zoom or whatever, or are they separate, right? One way, so a spec doc will go through several iterations before it becomes ready for engineering. And often when you take it to engineers, they'll ask, why didn't you think of this? Or when you discuss this, what was the outcome, right? So instead of trying to remember the meeting notes and stuff from all of these different reviews that you'll have of the spec, I highly recommend have a version history that says, on this date, I made these changes and reviewed it with this person. And this is the feedback, or these are the review comments that I got on the spec, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So thanks.
Yeah. So do we need to cover all this in one part of the entire document in a PDF document, right? And
you can't write all of it in one go. It often takes 2 months to write a spec.
Okay.
I do understand that most startups don't have that kind of luxury to spend 2 months writing a spec. When will they implement? They often want features implemented in 3 weeks. So how are you going to take 2 months to write the requirements? Now that's just a push-pull. So you basically crunch all of these, you make it less detailed. Remember that your engineers will start yelling at you saying, there are not enough details provided in my user story, there are not enough details provided in my spec document. Just live with that. But that is the price of speed, or the price of acceleration that we pay.